Do you want to win an Xbox One? Enter our 100,000 subscriber giveaway. All you have to do is like the video, subscribe, and leave a comment. Joe Rogan's status has grown to such an extent that only a handful of fighters could be considered as bigger or more influential stars in the eyes of the mainstream. Through his work in the UFC and of course his popular podcast, The Joe Rogan Experience, Rogan has elevated his star to a high level that few figures in the sporting world could ever hope to reach. And while Joe is a popular figure among most fighters who ply their trade in the promotion, as you would expect, he has made more than a few enemies over the years. With that in mind, we're going to take a look at why UFC fighters hate Joe Rogan. Number 10. Mid-fight comments. It's easy to forget just how loud Rogan and co need to be just to convey the right amount of excitement during a live broadcast. And while we at home use their energy to bolster our own while tuning in, sometimes the fighters themselves can hear Joe and his team drawing out the narrative mid-fight. One infamous example of this came when Quinton Rampage Jackson took to the media to speak his mind on the subject of Rogan's commentary, which, according to him, was biased against him. In the end, the pair did settle their beef, but this rather bizarre back and forth certainly managed to put the significance of the commentator's role into perspective.
Did I say he was fake?
Yeah.
Well, you know, heat of the moment interview.
Do you regret it, maybe?
No. If I thought he was fake right then, maybe it was something I saw recently then.
I'm saying you got your job to do, you know what I'm saying? And I can honestly say that I'm wrong for even going and saying it in the media, but when I did the interview, I must have just seen some.
Number 9. His biases. Rogan has his roots set deep into the world of premier mixed martial arts promotion, and as you expect, over the years, he's had the opportunity to form personal relationships with some of the sport's biggest stars. For Joe, he has admitted that calling the fights of close friends is something that he finds considerably more difficult. Fighters like Brendan Schaub and Donald Cerrone, who have both enjoyed mixed levels of success inside the octagon, both stand as good friends of Rogan as a result. He has to fight to keep a handle on his biases mid-fight, something he manages to do with varying degrees of control.
Joe Rogan had given analysis while Khabib and Al were fighting, and he took some criticism for it and he came out and answered for it. I am completely fine with where things lie.
Number 8. Breaking the fourth wall. Chael Sonnen at one point in time was seen as the greatest trash talker and one of the most divisive heels in combat sports. Now retired, he has passed that mantle in many ways to welterweight contender Colby Covington, a fighter whose knack for getting a rise out of people may even surpass the American gangsters. However, Joe Rogan managed to seriously piss Sonnen off by pulling back the curtain on Colby's gimmick, speaking to listeners in his podcast about how Covington's aim all along was purely based around getting more exposure.
You know what's really hilarious? Chael Sonnen's mad that I talked about what he does.
What Chael does?
No, that I talked about what Colby does.
As you would expect, Sonnen declared this to be the case of breaking the fourth wall, something that did not sit well with him whatsoever.
It is a mega industry. If you have knowledge of the industry, you don't out another guy.
Number 7. A fourth judge. Leonard Garcia will forever be remembered as one of the most exciting fighters to ever grace the sport of mixed martial arts. Though loved by a vast majority of fight fans, Garcia was forced to contend with some criticism from Joe Rogan after the commentators calling off his UFC 136 showdown with Nam Pham. Describing Garcia's wild fighting style as like throwing rocks, he made it clear that he believed Pham to be the fight's victor, something that led to a rather angry Leonard Garcia questioning his integrity and his role as a color commentator.
He's hanging in there. How good is this? Boom.
Look at the way Garcia throws these punches. It's like he's throwing a fastball.
Number 6. UFC 214's ugly end. Joe's decision to interview the clearly concussed Daniel Cormier in the wake of the lowest moment of his fighting career has been seen as one of the most unfortunate moments in the UFC's modern era. No one deserves to have a moment like that broadcast to the world, and yet just moments after being brutally TKO'd by his sworn enemy, Cormier was being interviewed by Rogan in an exchange that is among the most tough to watch post-fight interviews you'll ever see. In the time since, Joe's publicly stated that he was forced to rethink his approach to interviewing losing fighters, and thankfully, he has become far more careful and considerate when the time comes to decide. Though DC understood his thought process, many fighters were very unhappy with Rogan in the weeks that followed UFC 214.
What can you say at all about this and the rivalry between you and John?
I don't know, man. I guess if you win both fights, there is no rivalry, so.
Number 5, his commentary. Until you've spent years upon years watching fights, it's easy not to notice how exactly much our viewing experience is affected by the narratives drawn by the team in the commentary booth. On countless occasions over the years, Rogan's habit of slipping in the comfort of his own narrative has caused him to inaccurately call the action as it happens. Whether it's intentional or not, a fight between two athletes is something that is far too complex to narrow down to whatever the way you think the momentum is swinging. Rogan has been caught out by this far too often, and one of the most infamous examples coming from his calling was John Jones versus Alexander Gustafsson.
I would imagine that John has the leg kick advantage or the kicking advantage. Is that correct?
Yes. But in overall strikes, it's Gustafsson.
Nice straight jab by Gustafsson.
Number 4, drawing the narrative. Tyron Woodley is one of the most divisive fighters of his era. Though undoubtedly a welterweight, great at his peak, his fighting style and overall personality have rubbed more than a few people up the wrong way over the years. At one point in time, his relationship with Joe Rogan was strained due to Joe's repeated fixation on Tyron's clear cardio issues. Known as calculated but explosive fighter, Woodley seemed to think that Rogan had been taking too many digs at his cardio over the years, despite it rarely becoming an issue during his title reign. Of course, it was his slow, methodical pace that allowed him to do that, but all in all, the chosen one was certainly quite annoyed with how his fights were being presented to the world. Number 3, Khabib at UFC 223. Khabib Nurmagomedov's showdown with Al Iaquinta at UFC 223 to win the lightweight belt was seen by many as a masterful display in a short notice fight that could have proven tricky to a lesser fighter. However, on that night itself, Rogan for some reason seemed to be showing his clear bias in favor of the underdog Iaquinta. Khabib well and truly dominated that fight from start to finish, and while Al did well in moments, Rogan's commentary made it out to be far more competitive than it actually was. In the end, Khabib won the unanimous decision, and in the days followed, Joe released a statement on his official Instagram page apologizing for his calling of the fight.
You know, it's crazy. No, 26-0, 10-0 in UFC. UFC undefeated lightweight champion. Alhamdulillah.
Number 2, bad cardio. SBG Ireland's Cathal Pendred enjoyed a reasonably successful run in the UFC, going 4-2 in the promotion before retiring from the sport to focus on other things. However, in the middle of his razor-thin decision victory over Sean Spencer, Pendred managed to pick up on Rogan's commentary, and he was particularly annoyed at the fight caller telling the world that his cardio was failing him in the final round.
People were asking me what about what Joe Rogan said, and clearly if they were asking me, they had thought he was being biased.
Speaking to the media directly afterwards, Pendred took aim at Joe, weaving a narrative that he considered to be false, something that he claimed frustrated him to no end mid-fight.
I wouldn't say anything to Joe. It's not my place. I'm not going to go up and tell him how to do his job. I wouldn't expect him to come up and tell me how to do my job.
Number 1, I clearly felt a tap. One of the most meme-worthy moments of the era was also another example of Rogan failing to understand the problem with interviewing a clearly concussed fighter. Alistair Overeem had just fallen short of his goal of winning the UFC heavyweight title after a competitive but ultimately a losing effort against the champ Stipe Miocic. After interviewing the winning fighter, Rogan turned his attention to the Reem, who quickly made it clear that he believed himself to be the fight's victor. Overeem had managed to drop Stipe with a hard right hand early on before attempting to lock up the guillotine choke. Miocic of course quickly escaped, but upon being asked by Rogan to elaborate, Overeem went on to explain how he clearly felt his opponent tapped to this submission. Joe, in a move that may be deemed to be disrespectful, walked Alistair through the replay and in somewhat of a condescending fashion asked him to show where he felt the tap. The entire exchange just felt very awkward, and shortly after, Rogan vowed to never again interview a fighter who had just been knocked out.
Well, it didn't look like a tap to us, but I understand that you felt that way, and thank you for a great fight.
And that will just about do it for our reflection on the various beefs that have been scattered through Rogan's time in the UFC's #1 fight caller. If you enjoyed this video, do be sure to leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel so you can stay up to date with all of our latest uploads. And as always, thanks for watching.
Did I say he was fake?
Yeah.
Well, you know, heat of the moment interview.
Do you regret it, maybe?
No. If I thought he was fake right then, maybe it was something I saw recently then.
Honestly, you got your job to do, you know what I'm saying? And I can honestly say that I'm wrong for even going and saying it in the media, but when I did the interview, I must have just seen some.
You know what's really hilarious? Chael Sonnen's mad that I talked about what he does. that I
What Chael does?
No, that I talked about what Colby does.
It is a mega industry. If you have knowledge of the industry, you don't out another guy.
What can you say at all about this and the rivalry between you and John?
I don't know, man. I guess if you win both fights, there is no rivalry. So
You know, it's crazy. No, 26-0, 10-0 in UFC. UFC undisputed, undefeated lightweight champion. Alhamdulillah.